Hello and welcome to Cloaker's Education Foundation, where we provide quality content for amazing teachers and students. If you're joining us from our previous video on civil rights and civil liberties, welcome back. And if this is your first time, we're glad you're here. This is our U.S. government series, and this lesson is on the Texas government. Before we begin, don't forget to check out the links in the description below for resources on Teachers Pay Teachers and a set of free guided notes to go along with this lesson. So let's dive in. Texas has its own Texas Constitution. It establishes the rights, liberties, and responsibilities of the citizen. It structures the powers and limitations of the government, and also provides a process in which the Constitution can be amended or changed. In order to amend the Texas Constitution, you must have 2/3 of the members of the House of Representatives and the state Senate to vote. The Texas legislature is one of the 3 branches of the state government, along with the judicial and the executive branch, set up in a bicameral structure where there are 2 chambers consisting of the House of Representatives and the Senate. The Senate has the authority to affirm or reject the governor's appointments, and the House can initiate legislation, raise taxes, even though both chambers must agree before any tax bills can be passed. So how often are they in session? The legislature meets in a regular session every other year, biennial, in odd calendar years with sessions beginning in the second Tuesday of January. Now, the Texas Constitution does empower the governor to call a special session that can last for a maximum of 30 days. However, this has been very crucial and criticized because many reformers believe the affairs of the state are too complex to handle every other year. Term limits have been another hot topic. Term limits, or term limitation, is the movement to restrict the number of terms a public official may serve. Although 15 states have enacted term laws, Texas has not adopted term limits for its legislators. Advocates say that it will improve the capacity of the legislature to do its work, and opponents will say term limits will make legislation ineffective because we'll have constant turnover. While political parties have been a major hot topic for our national government, for Texas and for most of the state's history, political parties have played a very small role in legislation because until very recently, nearly every legislator was a Democrat. In 2003 marked the beginning of a turn towards a more partisan legislature, especially in the Texas House. And this is perhaps because of the big drama in 2009 over voter IDs, which pitted almost every Democrat legislator against every Republican lawmaker. And so political parties have played a small role, but political ideology has influenced legislation in several ways, as it's a fairly long spectrum, with one side leaning towards liberalism, the political views that seeks to change the political, economic, and social institutions and foster the development of a well-being of the individual, and conservatism, the political view that seeks to preserve the political, economic, and social institutions of society against this abrupt change. Let's talk about the executive branch, specifically the governor and the executive bureaucracy in the state of Texas. The governor is the chief executive officer of the state with the important powers to influence policy making. And in order to be the governor in Texas, you must be an American citizen, at least 30 years of age, and a resident of the state for 5 years prior to the election. Please pay attention to those as those are on the test over the Texas state government. The governor serves a 4-year term, increased from the 2-year term in 1972, and there are no limitations on the number of terms the governor can serve. Elections are held in even number years, not coinciding with national presidential elections. So 2010, 2014, 2018, 2022. Very similar to our national government, the governor may be removed through the process of impeachment. Now, this is, of course, the formal process where the House accuses an executive or a judicial branch member of misconduct and a criminal offense. The House votes to impeach the governor by majority, and the Senate will conduct the trial and may vote to remove them with a 2/3 victory. The Texas Constitution grants the governor the authority to act in a broad range of policy areas, but most of the governor's powers are coupled with limitations similar to that of the national government. The governor gives the condition of the state or the state of the state at each legislative session to update the legislature about the beginning and the conditions of the state, and veto legislation. The Texas Constitution permits the governor to veto bills passed by the legislature. Now, when a law is passed by the legislation and goes to the governor's desk, he has 3 options. Now, he could take no action, or she could take no action, and that bill becomes a law after 10 days if they're still in session, but that's not really an option of the governor. The governor can approve the legislation and sign the bill into law. They can veto the entire bill, or they can do what's known as a line item veto. This is one of the powers that most governors have, but the president does not. The governor has the power to strike out sections or items of a bill while signing in the remainder into law. This authority is only applicable in certain appropriations and bills. The current governor of Texas is Greg Abbott. Now let's talk about the judicial branch of the Texas government. Very similar to our national government, there are different types of legal disputes. There are criminal cases, which is a legal dispute and a violation of penal law. This is where the state presses charges against a citizen for violating the law. People who are involved, like the defendant, the one who is charged with the crime, the prosecutor, the attorney who is pressing the charges on behalf of the government. And of course, he is pressing or she is pressing these charges, and they have the burden of proof. In a criminal case, the prosecutor has the burden of proof. They must show the defendant's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. Burden of proof is the legal obligation of a party in a lawsuit to prove its position in court. Criminal cases are broken down depending on their severity. There's misdemeanors, which is a relatively minor criminal offense, such as a traffic violation. And then there are, of course, Class A, Class B, and Class C misdemeanors, with Class A being the most serious. A traffic violation like speeding or failing to turn or reckless driving is usually a Class C misdemeanor. More serious criminal cases are known as felonies, and the severity lies in descending order with regards, so 4th degree felony is the least serious. A felony constitutes a serious criminal offense such as murder, sexual assault, or burglary, and they're divided into 5 categories. So capital felony, which punishment may be the death penalty, 1st degree, 2nd degree, 3rd degree, or 4th degree felony, which is usually state jail. And there are also civil cases. This is a legal dispute between 2 parties or 2 or more parties, a corporation or a government, and people involved like the plaintiff, those that are initiating the lawsuit, and the defendant, the one who is responding to the party. In a civil case, the plaintiff has the burden of proof to prove the case by a preponderance of evidence, an overwhelming amount of evidence. There is a multitude of types of civil disputes. A tort case, which involves personal injury or damage. Probate, which is usually when someone passes away and they're trying to decide what to do with the property. Domestic relations, such as a relationship between husband and wife or parents and children. Contract case, which is exactly like the name sounds. It is written over or done over implied legal agreements. And a property case, such as ownership of real estate or personal possessions, such as land, jewelry, or automobiles. Negotiation and compromise, both vital principles to the American democracy. In practice, most legal cases are solved not by trial, but through negotiation and compromise. In civil cases, they may decide to resolve the dispute out of court rather than going through the trial process. And in criminal cases, the defendant and prosecutor may resolve it through a plea bargain, which is a procedure where the defendant agrees to plead guilty in order to receive less punishment than the maximum for the offense. Court procedures and judicial proceedings are basically divided into trials and appeals. And this has a variety of steps. Procedures like the formal examination of a civil or criminal action in accordance with the law before a judge, meaning in front of a judge who has jurisdiction to hear it. So, example jurisdiction would be in the state of which the crime has taken place. It involves the attorneys, witnesses, testimonies, evidence, judges, and occasionally juries. In the process, the general trial court is concerned with the questions of the facts and the law as it applies to those facts. And then you get the verdict. And the verdict in a civil case will determine which party wins in the lawsuit. And in a criminal case, the verdict will determine whether the defendant is guilty or not guilty as charged. And then you have appeals. Appeal is taking of a case from a lower court to a higher court because the losing party is upset with the lower court's decision. As grounds for appeal in a civil case, they may say the lower court failed to follow procedure or did not apply the law correctly, and they'll try to get a higher court to review it. In a criminal case, they may say there was a reversible error which impacted the trial, and we may need a new one. It involves attorneys, written and oral arguments, because again, you're arguing why your case should be reheard, the written court records. In general, the appeals court is concerned with the issues of the law and procedure, and they may uphold or reverse the decision of the lower court, or they may even modify it and say, yes, we agree to it, and we will reduce or extend the punishment based off of their findings. And so Texas has three courts. They have the local courts, the district courts, and the appellate court or the Court of Appeals. Municipal courts are created by the Texas legislature and are incorporated in every city. 913 cities staffed by over 1,000 judges. They're generally involving Class C misdemeanors, city violations of ordinances, and generally act as traffic courts. Right, that's 80% of their workload in the municipal court system. Now you have justice of the peace courts. The Texas Constitution requires each county to have at least one justice of peace court, and larger counties can have as many as 16. There are over 800 of them statewide. They hear Class C misdemeanors. They have civil jurisdiction and civil cases as long as they're under $10,000. They act as small claims courts. They also handle evictions in the state of Texas as well. Moving up the ladder, we have county courts created by the Texas Constitution. In each of the state's 254 counties, they have jurisdiction over Class A and Class B misdemeanors. They handle civil cases between $200 and $5,000, and they handle appeals de novo or new trials from the Justice of Peace courts or municipal courts. With the growing population in Texas, they created statutory county courts. This is more courts. They handle probate and other supplemental county duties. They have criminal jurisdiction in Class A and Class B misdemeanors. They handle civil courts involving amounts up to $100,000. They handle Class C misdemeanor appeals from Justice of Peace courts or municipal courts, and they handle civil case appeals. So they're mostly having to deal with the appeals from the lower courts and support the county courts where they are. There are district courts. Yes, there are a lot of types of courts. I know what you're thinking. I read your mind. Texas has 449 district courts, and they serve specific geographical areas. It may be several counties or parts of rural counties, or in cases of highly dense areas, small pieces of a county with a large population. They're the basic trial courts of the state. They handle criminal cases involving felonies, and they also handle civil cases as well. Regardless of what court you are in a criminal case, the prosecutor has the burden of proof, and in a civil case, the burden of proof is on the plaintiff. But it is not as heavy as it is with criminal disputes. With the exception of trying to terminate parental rights, the plaintiff is only required to prove a case by a preponderance of evidence, as opposed to beyond a reasonable doubt. But let's say a court case does not go the way it was planned, and the losing party then appeals. It goes to the appellate court, especially in a criminal case. They review the court record, they schedule oral arguments, they study the briefs and the facts, the evidence prior to them showing up in the oral arguments. They have a discussion, and they write opinions once the court is over. And the appellate court, very much like the Supreme Court, they can affirm the lower decision, they can reverse it, they can modify it, or they can affirm and change, which very rarely happens, but there are cases of such actions. Just like in our judicial branch, when it comes to the appeals court in Texas, there are three types of opinions: majority, dissenting, and concurring. Majority meaning this is what the court agrees. Here's the guideline for the lower courts. Here's the official ruling. The dissenting, I disagree with the decision. Here's why. And concurring, which is I agree with the court's decision, but I disagree on the reasoning why they have that decision. In Texas, there are three types of appellate courts, or three ways your court case can be appealed. It can go through the Court of Appeals, the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals, or the Texas Supreme Court. Texas is one of two states with two Supreme Courts. The Texas Supreme Court hears civil disputes. Again, that's a dispute between two parties. And the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals, which solely deals with criminal matters. Oklahoma is the only other state that has two Supreme Courts. And that's pretty cool. Or maybe it's not cool. You can write an opinion on it, a majority opinion, a dissenting opinion, or a concurring opinion, and you can do that when I finish the lesson. Let's go to the next slide. There are 14 Court of Appeals in Texas. You can see them on that map there. In the western counties, which are sparsely populated, there are a few. As you go further and further east, where it is more densely populated, there are more and more. The Court of Appeals hears both criminal and civil cases from the county, with the exception of the death penalty. Those go directly to the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals, the supreme law, the Supreme Court when it comes to criminal offenses. Altogether, there's only 80 justices on staff of the 14 courts, and It depends on the workload of how they shuffle them around. It can be from 3 to 13 depending on the workload. The Texas Court of Criminal Appeals, the highest or supreme appellate court for criminal cases. They consider the death penalty cases that are appealed directly, consist of 1 presiding justice and 8 additional justices. So like the Supreme Court, they have 9. And decisions may be appealed to the Supreme Court if it involves a matter of federal law or the U.S. Constitution. So again, the National Supreme Court is the highest level in our judicial system. The Texas Supreme Court, found just off to the side of the Capitol building. It is the supreme appellate court for all civil cases. It consists of 9 justices, 1 chief justice, and 8 associates. However, different than the national system, Texas judges are elected, and these judges are elected for 6-year terms. Decisions here can be appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court if it matters with federal law or the U.S. Constitution, just like with our criminal Supreme Court. And they, of course, administer the judicial branch of the state. There they are, so fancy and dapper, smiling for their portrait. You can look up and see where these judges are from. I'm going to let you do that on your own time so I can continue and get on with the lesson. With the exception of some municipal judges which are appointed, Texas judges are chosen in an election in which both names appear of the candidate and their party affiliations appear on the ballot, whether they are a Republican or a Democrat. Texas and 7 other states elect judges on the ballot. Judges have to campaign for elections just like members of the legislative branch and members of the executive branch. This has been heavily criticized, as is justice for sale in Texas. Elections mean that judicial selection system is based on the elections and that money plays a role in the process. Successful candidates that get elected to the Texas Supreme Court have generally spent at least $800,000 in their campaign. Candidates for district judges have raised and spent more than $30,000 on their campaign. And so many believe that prominent law firms may push money behind a candidate so that way if their court case comes up or a court case involving them comes up, they'll be looked upon more favorably. This whole debate brings up the topic of partisan politics and the fact that judges are supposed to be impartial at the start. Can a Republican defendant receive a fair trial from a Democratic judge or vice versa? And so as long as Texas elect judges on a partisan ballot, some individuals will believe that party politics will determine their outcome rather than the law or the Constitution. Unlike the national system, though, we have judicial departure in Texas. They can die in office, they can retire, they can lose their election, or they can be impeached, and not all of those are options at the national level. To remove a judge, there must be an incompetence or unethical conduct. Disciplinary actions against the judge may be a warning or a reprimand, or they may impeach them, and that would again go to the House and the Senate for trial and voting. And so I want to touch on some other major issues in Texas before the end of this lesson, and that is voting in Texas. In order to vote in Texas, there are certain requirements, such as you have to be at least 18 years old on the day of the election. You have to be a resident of the voting precinct on election day. You have to be registered as a voter at least 30 days before the election, and a resident of the state and county 30 days before the election. Now, I remember this in college of going to vote, and 2 girls in front of me tried to vote in Texas with their Colorado driver's license. And so they respectfully told them to leave because they had to go back to Colorado to vote. And unfortunately, I don't think they got a midnight flight. So register to vote in Texas and register with your address You have to vote in the county of which you live. Now, financing and the budget is huge when it comes to politics on the national and state level. Texas is one of only 7 states that does not have an income tax, along with places like Nevada, Alaska, and Florida. In Texas, you keep more of your money at the start because you're not paying an additional tax or fee to the state. Now, I hope you like money, and if you don't, you can give it to your teacher. They will make sure to take care of that burden for you, and you'll never have to deal with that money again. The state sales tax is one of the 2 main ways Texas makes up revenue. That and other taxes on items like gasoline, cars, trucks, housing, they're used to raise money in Texas. In addition, corporations pay a franchise tax for the privilege of doing business in Texas. And the most important non-tax sources are grants from the federal governments and monies earned from public lands. That wraps up our lesson. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching this video and this series. It was a pleasure of mine to put it together for you. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you found this helpful. Please check us out on Teachers Pay Teachers, YouTube, Rumble, and the Cloaker Education Foundation website. We have a ton of educational resources and free videos for y'all on courses like biology, world geography, world history, U.S. history, business, finance, economics, government, APs, and a whole bunch more, all there for you. Our newest content right there on the screen, and also a link to our channel, which is just a click away. I'll see you there.